Are you just starting out in astrophotography? In this video, I'll be sharing 5 things that don't get talked about much in astrophotography tutorials. These are tips that I've learned over the years that make a big difference in my astrophotography. I hope they will make your life a lot easier. Welcome to Deep Sky Detail. So there are a lot of tutorials out there that show you how to pull a line and how important it is, how to process your images. But the tips I'm about to share are ones that I don't hear nearly often enough. And I really hope that if you're thinking about getting into the hobby, or if you're new to the hobby, that these tips will help. I'm going to start off with what I think are the most obvious tips and end with the less obvious one. So tip number 1. This tip may be a bit controversial, but I think it's technically correct. Here it goes. Image multiple targets a night. Hear me out. Generally, when you start astrophotography, especially deep sky astrophotography, you want to image everything all at once. So you move around from target to target, taking an hour's worth of imaging on one target and then move on to the next. This isn't what I'm talking about. As you progress in the hobby, you realize that to get really nice images, you need more total exposure time on each target. So you may spend the whole night just imaging one deep space object. And that is the correct way to really think about it. So why do I say image multiple targets a night? Well, if you only image one target a night, it means you start imaging low in the sky through a lot of the atmosphere. And the subframes start to get better and better as you get to the maximum height in the sky or the transit, because there's less atmosphere and light pollution on each subframe. Then you need to do a meridian flip, which does take time, only for the subframes to start getting worse and worse again as the object starts to set. After you're done, you start to throw out half of your data because of sky glow and bad guiding, or as your mount settles, etc. In my experience, the transit is where it's at. Guiding is better because there is less turbulence. Light pollution and sky glow are minimized. I throw out very few subframes when an object is near the transit. The solution, I think, is to, at the beginning of the evening, choose a target that is about 1.5 to 2 hours from its highest point or transit in the east. Image it for about 3 or 4 hours without doing the meridian flip. And most mounts nowadays can image past the meridian for an hour or two. And then move on to another target that is 1.5 to 2 hours from the transit, again, imaging it for 2 to 3 hours. You won't throw out as many subs, but you also won't be wasting precious imaging time. The next night, repeat with the same targets. You can even use my free SNR calculator app to figure out how much total integration time you'll need for each target. You'll eventually get the same amount of data as if you only image one target each night, but your data will be better. Of course, there is always the risk that clouds will ruin everything, but if you're only imaging one target a night and throwing out half the data because the targets were too low in the sky, you're actually not losing out that much compared to doing it this way. So picture this. You're set up on a hot, humid summer night. A few hours in, your images look soft with halos around the stars. You check the focus and it's perfect, and then you check your lens and it's soaked with dew. So tip number 2 is control your dew with dew heater strips and a dew shield. This is my C8. Sometimes I use it for imaging galaxies. It's not the best for imaging galaxies, but it is pointed at space for hours at a time, losing heat to space. The air around it condenses and all the moisture in the air collects on the corrector plate, and it dews up. It's not fun. It will ruin your night of imaging. Ask me how I know. Also, the moisture can get in between the glass in your doublet or triplet refractors, and that's no fun either because it's really hard to get that moisture out. Again, ask me how I know. Invest in some cheap dew strips. I got these on Amazon and connected them together using Velcro to make them big enough for my C8. One works fine for my 80mm refractor, and they just connect using USB. They stay just warm enough to keep the dew off, and they're low power. They're perfect. Tip number 3, and dew isn't just a problem for your lens or corrector plate. I live in a humid region and dew can get everywhere. On the telescope body, your camera, and on your USB cables. So my next tip is always have a backup of your USB cables. Maybe your mount is acting up. If something isn't connecting or getting power, like your camera or filter wheel, or whatever, it's probably not the actual equipment that's the problem. It's likely your USB cables went bad. Most aren't made for being outdoors. Cold weather can make them brittle and the wires can break inside. So having an extra set will let you troubleshoot that much more quickly. So tip number 4, you know what else wears out USB cables? Unplugging them and plugging them back in all the time. It just wears them out and it wears you out. All this plugging and unplugging can get very tedious. So why not minimize your setup time? Tip number 3, keep your imaging trained together as long as you're going to use it and until you change targets or change OTAs. Don't take it apart each session, and this includes the USB cables. I've got my C8 set up with camera and off-axis guider with all the cables plugged in. When I'm setting it up, I carried it out and put it all on my mount. When I'm taking it down, I take it all off and store it on a drill press vise. The vise is made out of iron, so it's heavy enough to keep things stable without the need to drill the vise into a table. But you can do that if you'd like. Everything just stays together. It lets me reuse flats from one session to another. Tip number 5, and this one might be a little bit controversial, but as you're probably aware, you don't see very many product reviews on my channel, and if there are reviews, they're things I bought with my own funds, or funds from my supporters to test, and they're usually not telescopes. Tip number 5 is related to this. Don't feel pressure to chase the latest and greatest equipment. Equipment is important, don't get me wrong, but there is a lot of marketing and hype out there. Figure out what your imaging goals are, what your budget is. Don't be afraid to check classifieds on cloudy nights and have fun with what you have. You know, you can buy used equipment and then sell it for almost what you bought it for later on. So buying used equipment is a good way to go to test new things. You will eventually want to upgrade your gear, and that's fine. It will come from a natural desire to move on and intrinsic motivation. It won't feel like a race against other astrophotographers. If you stayed this long, thank you. I'm going to give you one last bonus tip, and it's this. It's okay to take breaks from the hobby every now and then. They don't have to be large breaks, but let's face it, sleep is good. Not stressing out is good. If the hobby is making you feel stressed, it's okay to take a break. I like the hobby, but sometimes there is pressure to just keep imaging to get the absolute best image you can. For some people, it's easy to do just that. For others, and I include myself in that group, there are demands that take priority, like family, work, and health. If I have 10 clear nights in a row, but I ignore my son's soccer games during those nights, or I'm not there to help them with their homework, I don't think I'd feel very good about myself. Astrophotography should be about making you happy, and sometimes you need to take a break for a night or two, or a week, or a month, and that's okay. You'll come back to the hobby more refreshed and motivated. Anyway, I hope you found some of these tips useful. They've helped me over the past few years. If these tips have helped, consider liking and subscribing. Got a favorite beginner tip I missed? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear what's worked for you. And hey, if you're wondering about whether longer subframes are really worth it, check this experiment that I did here on long subframes versus very long subframes. It's interesting. Thanks for watching.